For 80 years, people who love airplanes have argued about one question: which fighter plane with a propeller was the fastest in World War II? Today, we're answering that based on the fastest speeds recorded in flat flight from official test papers, war reports, and checked tests. Here are the 8 fastest propeller fighters that actually flew during World War II. These aren't test planes that never left the ground, or designs that only existed in the minds of engineers. Every airplane on this list was actually built, and most of them fought enemies in real battles. Their speeds were possible because of very new and advanced engineering, urgent new ideas, and the non-stop effort to rule the skies in the most terrible war humanity has ever had. Let's count down from number 8 to the very fastest propeller fighter that was the best in the skies in 1945. At number 8 is Germany's Focke-Wulf Fw 1909, reaching a maximum speed of 426 miles per hour, known as the Dora, or long-nose type. This fighter was a big and important change from the older Fw 190 series that had used a round engine and had caused trouble for Allied pilots since 1941. The D9 replaced the earlier BMW round engine with a straight Junkers Jumo 213A engine, which needed a longer nose that gave the plane its special look. This change turned the Fw 190 from a powerful fighter that flew low into a fast the fighter that could attack Allied bombers high up and fight well against the newest American and British fighters. Building of this plane started in August 1944, and over 700 were made before the war ended. German Luftwaffe pilots liked its improved speed. When flying high while it kept a great way, it could roll, and its strong build that made the Fw 190 series famous. In the tough final months of the war, the Dora 9 fought against huge numbers of enemies to defend Germany. Number 7 is Britain's Hawker Tempest V, capable of 435 miles per hour. Made as a better version of the earlier Hawker Typhoon, the Tempest had a thinner wing shape and a more powerful Napier Sabre engine that changed it into one of the RAF's most useful low-flying fighters. The Tempest started being used in April 1944, arriving just in time to face Germany's V-1 flying bombs. Its amazing speed, when flying low, made it the best plane for stopping the V-1 South during the war. With Tempest groups shooting down over 800 of the pilotless weapons, British pilots found they could catch the V-1 South in flat flight and either shoot them down or use their wingtips to flip them off course. But the Tempest was just as deadly in airfights. Its mix of speed, powerful guns, and easy handling made it a scary enemy for German fighters. In the last year of the war, Tempest groups achieved many impressive wins while helping the Allied push across Europe. Many pilots thought it was the best piston engine fighter Britain ever made. At number 6 is the famous Supermarine Spitfire Mark 14, reaching 446 miles per hour. This version was the greatest improvement of the well-known fighter that had saved Britain during the hardest days of 1940. But the Mk.XIV was a totally different machine from those first Spitfires. The key was the Rolls-Royce Griffon 65 engine, making over 2,000 horsepower, compared to the 1,000 horsepower Merlin engines of earlier types. This huge boost in power meant the whole plane frame had to be made stronger, and the tail parts made bigger to handle the extra force. The result was a Spitfire that could climb like a rocket and fight well at high levels, where earlier versions had trouble. First flown in January 1943, the Mk.XIV started with fighter groups in early 1944. It immediately proved itself against the newest German fighters, and was especially good at stopping high-flying spy planes and the new German jets. The power gave it speed when taking off that surprised German pilots who were used to outrunning earlier Spitfire types. Over 900 were built, serving well until the war's end. Before we get to the top 5 fastest fighters, I'd love to know where you're watching from, and which of these planes you think should be number 1. Drop a comment below, and let me know if any of these rankings surprise you. And if you're enjoying this close look at World War II airplanes, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Number 5 is America's Grumman F8F Bearcat, capable of 455 miles per hour. Designed as the best light fighter for aircraft carriers, the Bearcat was Grumman's try to build the most powerful airplane that could take off from small escort carriers, the small jeep carriers that were so helpful in the Pacific War. Engineers started with the huge Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine making 2,100 horsepower, and built the smallest, lightest plane frame that could handle that power. The result was amazing. The Bearcat could climb to 10,000 feet in just 94 seconds, faster than any American fighter of that time. Its ability to roll was incredible, and even though it was small, It carried for 20mm cannons, or 6.50 caliber machine guns. The Bearcat's timing was not good. It started service in February 1945, too late to fight in World War II. Only 24 had reached flying groups when Japan gave up in August, but its performance impressed everyone who flew it. Test pilots called it the finest handling fighter of the propeller age. After the war, it became the plane flown by the Blue Angels and set many time-to-climb records that lasted for many years. At number 4 is Germany's Focke-Wulf Ta, reaching 469 miles per hour. This high-flying interceptor was Germany's urgent attempt to fight American and British bombers flying above 30,000 feet, where most German fighters had trouble flying well. The Ta had long wings, stretching nearly 48 feet, a special cockpit that was pumped with air pressurized, and a Junkers Jumo 213 East engine with a two-part supercharger. This mix gave an amazing performance above 40,000 feet, a height where most Allied fighters were struggling to breathe. At these heights, the Ta could climb faster, fly faster, and move better than almost any enemy. But the airplane arrived much too late. Building started in November 1944, and perhaps 150 were built before the war's end. Few reached the fighting units, and even fewer saw combat. Those that did earned respect from Allied pilots who met them. On April 14, 1945, pilot Willy Reschke, flying a Ta, fought for P-51 Mustangs high up, shooting down 2 and damaging a 3rd before getting away, which showed how capable the plane was. The Ta showed how desperate Germany was for new technology in the final months. It was an excellent design that came when Germany didn't have the fuel, pilots, or factories to use it well. What could have changed the war in 1943 became a small side note in 1945. Number 3 is the Republic P-47M Thunderbolt, capable of 472 miles per hour. This special version of the famous Jug was built for one job: catching and destroying Germany's fast, high-flying fighters and jets that had started showing up over Europe in late 1944. The P-47M had a specially changed Pratt & Whitney R280-057 engine with a better turbocharger system, water injection for extra power when needed, and many changes to make it lighter. These changes turned the already fast Thunderbolt into a high-altitude interceptor that could fight German jets and reach speeds that surprised pilots used to flying earlier P-47 versions. Only 130 P-47Ms were built, starting service in December 1944 with the 56th Fighter Group, the only unit to fly this type. The 56th had specifically asked for a faster Thunderbolt to fight the growing threat from German jets. In reality, the P-47M was a bit tricky. Its high-performance engine needed very careful care, and early models had serious engine problems that kept the planes on the ground for weeks. Once these problems were fixed, the P-47M proved deadly. It combined the Thunderbolt's famous strength and heavy guns with speed that could match or beat almost any German piston engine fighter. The 56th Fighter Group flew P-47Ms until the war's end, getting wins against both regular fighters and early jets. It showed the very best that could be done with the basic P-47 design. At number 2 was Germany's extraordinary Dornier Do 335 File the Arrow, reaching 474 miles per hour. This was different from any fighter plane that flew during World War II. Having a special push-pull setup, with engines at both the nose and the tail driving separate propellers, the idea was brilliant. By putting one Daimler-Benz DB603 engine, normally in the nose, and another one behind the cockpit, driving a pushing propeller at the tail, Dornier got rid of the drag pulling back of having engines on the wings, while doubling the available power. The result was a fighter with straight-line speed that was faster than almost everything in the sky, combined with heavy guns and armor that would have made it a tough fighter in battle. But like so many German designs late in the war, the Do 335 arrived much too late and in too few numbers. Delays in making it meant the first test plane didn't fly until October 1943. Planes that were meant to be used in battle started reaching test units in early 1945. But perhaps only 37 were finished before the war ended. None saw real fighting, though several were tested in high-speed trials that confirmed their amazing performance. The Do 335 showed German engineering at its most clever and most desperate. It was fast, heavily armed, and unlike anything else flying. But its complicated design, late arrival, and Germany's collapsing factories meant it never had a chance to prove itself in battle. Allied test pilots who flew captured examples after the war all praised its speed and handling, calling it one of the finest piston engine fighters ever built. If it had arrived 2 years earlier. And at number 1, the fastest propeller fighter of World War II, the North American P-51H Mustang, reaching 487 mph. This final, greatest version of the famous Mustang showed the absolute peak of American piston engine fighter design. The P-51H was completely redesigned, not just a slightly changed P-51D. Engineers took almost 1,500 pounds off the plane frame by using lighter building methods, a redesigned body, and taking out things that weren't needed. They put in the powerful Packard V165-029 engine, the American-built version of the Rolls-Royce Merlin, with water injection for extra power when needed. The result was a fighter that could nearly touch 500 miles per hour in flat flight. But speed wasn't everything. The weight reduction completely changed how the Mustang handled. The P-51H rolled faster, climbed quicker, and moved more easily than any previous type. Test pilots called it the best handling Mustang ever built. It kept the P-51's famous range, over 850 miles on its own fuel, meaning it could fly with bombers far into Japan, while outrunning almost any enemy fighter. Building began in February 1945, and 555 had been delivered by August, when Japan surrendered. They arrived too late for fighting in Europe, and while some reached the Pacific, none fought in air combat before the war ended. But the P-51H showed what was possible at the very limit of propeller fighter design. It was faster, lighter, and more capable than anything else with a piston engine. In a war that pushed airplane technology to new and amazing heights, the P-51H stood at the top. These 8 fighters show the very best of propeller-driven airplane technology. Each was designed during humanity's most desperate war, when countries poured unlimited money and effort into getting even the smallest edge in the sky. The engineers who designed them and the pilots who flew them pushed the limits of what was possible with piston engines and propellers. What's amazing is how close these top speeds are. Just 61 miles per hour separates the FW190D9 and number 8 from the P-51H at number 1. Every mile per hour came from many hours of testing, small improvements, and urgent new ideas under the pressure of wartime. Each airplane on this list was a masterpiece of engineering that could mean the difference between life and death for the men who flew them. Speed, of course, wasn't everything in air fighting. How well a plane could move, its guns, its range, how dependable it was, and the pilot's skill all mattered greatly. But in a war where seconds could decide who survived, where catching an enemy bomber before it reached its target could save thousands of lives, and where escaping larger numbers of enemies meant living to fight another day, speed was the ultimate advantage. Now you know the 8 fastest propeller fighters of World War II, ranked by official performance papers. Disagree with the list? Think another airplane should be here? Let me know in the comments which fighter you believe was truly the fastest, and